I just want to start off by saying that to make this story easier to understand, I'm going to have to use a lot of dialogue. Obviously, this wasn't recorded, so these aren't the exact words of anyone involved in this experience. I'm just trying to tell it as best as possible, and I think it'll benefit me and you if I use a lot of quotes. Just keep in mind that most of this is paraphrase. This will be a long one, so let's get into it. I wrote this at 2 a.m., and I have corona, so I apologize in advance. This happened in 2015 when I was 16 and still living in my hometown. A forgotten little beach town in the middle of nowhere that's so remote it's probably not even known by the surrounding areas. Basically, there's only 3 things you can do there as a teenager. Go to the movies, swim, or go to this pathetic little place called Miller's Fun Park. It's relatively similar to a lot of recreational parks, only a whole lot worse. There's a crappy arcade with broken skee-ball machines, batting cages that probably haven't been used since the early 80s, a pathetic mini golf course, and the most dangerous go-karts you've ever probably seen in your life. Seriously. Miller's Fun Park is on the edge of a field. On the opposite side of the field, about 3 miles down, is the beach, and across the single street are woods. If our town was in the middle of nowhere, Miller's is practically on the moon. Anyway, getting into the story, my cousin Emma and I decided on one summer night that we wanted to go go-karting. It was around 10 p.m., so we knew it would be almost deserted, but that was the way we liked it. I picked her up from her house, and we made the long drive down. Once we arrived and parked in the near-empty lot, we hopped out of the car and paid for our go-karting tickets. There was no one except for a few boys in the arcade, and a guy who looked to be in his 60s sitting on a bench near the batting cages. Emma and I paid no mind, and made our way to the go-kart track. Like I said, these karts were incredibly dangerous, so the only thing I was focused on is making sure that I wasn't going to skid and flip over as we raced around the winding track. This is why I didn't notice the guy walking over to the fence, and why I didn't notice him watching us until we pulled into the lanes after our last lap. He was standing on the other side of the fence, right where I parked. He stared at me with the most unsettling expression, a creepy smile displayed on his cracked lips as his dark eyes gleamed. I managed to make an uneasy smile back and handed another ticket to the guy who was running the go-karts, who was obviously higher than a kite. Emma and I went off again. This time I couldn't focus. This creepy guy was giving me the worst type of feeling. My eyes kept finding their way to the metal fence where he stood, unmoving, and watching us every time we were in his view. And the thing that was bothering me the most was that we only had 3 tickets. We were on our second to last run, and he was standing directly next to the exit gate. I was just praying that he would move before we were done, but of course, no such luck. Our last go came and went, and I had no choice but to pull in next to him, unbuckle my seatbelt, and get out of my go-kart. I glanced over at Emma a few feet away, trying to see if she was just as scared as I was. But she didn't seem to notice as she bounced over to me and bragged about how she had beaten me the last 2 times. I was barely listening. I opened the gate, and the guy stepped in front of us just as we were leaving. "Hey there," he said. His voice was dry, and he smelled like cigarettes. "What are you cute girls doing all alone here?" His eyes darted over to Emma, who was looking at the guy with both confusion and annoyance. What?" she said, pushing past the gate so she stood beside me. "It's so late." His tone was just as hungry as his eyes, and he reminded me of a snake. "Do your parents know you're out?" I answered quickly. Yes. They're waiting for us, actually, so we should probably get going." This was a lie, and probably sounded like it from my tone, but I tried to push past him anyway. That didn't work. He grabbed my shoulder to keep me in front of him. "Nonsense. I saw you girls pull in here alone." My heart dropped to my stomach. "Are you heading out? Why don't I walk you to your car?" He began to inch towards me, and I looked over to Emma for help. With one swift movement, she pulled me halfway behind her and started sizing the guy up. This was pretty dumb, as we were both small, and though she was a few inches taller than me, neither of us were anywhere near his height. This man was easily 6'2", but Emma didn't seem to care. "Actually, we were just headed to the arcade," she said harshly. "Her boyfriend is going to meet us there." I did have a boyfriend at the time, but he wasn't coming. He wasn't even in town, and she knew this. This guy's face immediately changes. His smile disappeared, and he is now glaring down at me with a look of annoyance in his eyes, and I felt myself start to cower. "Boyfriend," he said roughly. Emma didn't give me a chance to respond. She grabbed my arm and tugged me behind her into the arcade. The boys from before had already left, and the usual girl who worked in there was nowhere to be found. Still, it felt safer than outside. We ran to the back and hid behind the claw machine. "What the hell are we going to do? I left my phone in my car," I whisper shouted. "I don't have mine either," she said, face-palming. "We're just gonna have to make a run for it." "Are you crazy? He's probably waiting for us in the parking lot." "What about the guy who runs the go-karts? Could we get him to walk out with us?" I just shook my head. "He's as high as Mount Everest right now. I don't want to risk running all the way to the ticket stand for nothing." "Then we have no choice." She stood up, pulling me with her. "Let's go." I swallowed hard, wanting to cry. I had never been that scared before. There was something so unnerving about the guy outside. We made our way out of the arcade, looking to see if he was nearby. The park was now absolutely deserted. Emma practically had to drag me to the exit. I was looking in every direction, waiting for the guy to come out of the woods or something and pounce on us. But he didn't. "Get your keys out," Emma instructed, and I pulled them from my pocket. We were about 20 feet from my car when I stopped dead in my tracks. "What?" she whispered. I stared at the car, keys in hand. It was then that I had the horrifying realization that I had never locked it. "I never locked the car, Emma." "What?" "I didn't lock it. What if—" I trailed off, but she knew what I was trying to say. She started inching towards the car, and I grabbed her arm to stop her, but she pulled away. "I'm just going to take a peek. If I say run, you run." Her voice was quiet. I nodded in response. She eventually made it close enough to see inside, but by the way she was squinting, I knew it was too dark to make out anything. My heart was beating out of my chest. What if he's in there? What if he jumps out? What if he tries to strangle us like in the movies? All of these thoughts almost drown out the unmistakable sounds of shoes slamming against pavement. My head whipped around instantly, and there he was, sprinting at us at full speed. I screamed bloody murder and broke for the car, jiggling the handle, and as I did, I realized that I had locked it. Emma was already on the other side, screaming at me to unlock it. I fumbled with the keys, but I managed not to drop them as I unlocked the door. I flung it open and practically threw myself inside. I had just managed to close the door when he was there, slamming his fists against the window and shouting incoherently. I was sobbing at this point and barely managed to lock the doors as he goes for the handle and yanks it as hard as he can. Emma was screaming at me to go, and through my tears, I shoved the key into the ignition and flew into reverse. He was still chasing us and yelling as I veered backwards out of the lot and turned as fast as I could while slamming on the gas. I was driving like I was still in a go-kart, but I didn't care. I could barely see the road through the floods of tears, and Emma had to grab the wheel several times to keep us from crashing before I regained my composure, as we drove at least 30 miles over the speed limit the whole way back to my house. We didn't tell either of our parents about what happened, and looking back, I wish we had, because there was obviously something wrong with that guy, but we were too scared of what they might say or do. I think we thought that they would blame us somehow, so it stayed a secret between me and Emma. It was something that we didn't even talk about until months after the horrifying encounter. It's safe to say that we never went back to Miller's Fun Park ever again. If I have any parting words, it would be that I urge all of you to be extremely careful when you're going out at night.
There's always a reason to be afraid.